I call this meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 3, our roll call. Ms. Secretary Brino, may we have the roll call?
Commissioner Oki. Here. Commissioner Kerpes. Commissioner Maggio.
Here.
Commissioner Marks.
Present.
Commissioner Topchini.
Are they working, our mics?
Vice Chair Bergstein.
Here.
Chair Charity.
Here. Thank you very much. Moving on from item 3 to item 4, approval of tonight's agenda. Commissioners, having reviewed tonight's agenda, do you have any motions to amend or a motion to approve?
Move it. Second.
Thanks very much. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Very much. Thank you very much. Moving on from item 4 to item 5, approval of the minutes of our last meeting, May 9th, 2019. I believe we did have some review of these minutes, and we wanted to maybe make an
My question was on page 4 under, let's see, Appeal D-4389, affirming the hearing examiner's decision. I don't believe we affirmed the decision in whole. I think we affirmed it in part and overturned it in part.
Yeah, we changed the evaluation.
Yes.
Yes, so how would we word that, Ms. Regan? Do you recall we changed that that evaluation to $7? Maybe we should say affirmed in part. And
Yes, it should be affirming in part and reversing in part.
very good. So we'll have that changed to affirmed in part and reversed in part. And do we have a motion to
Move
to
to approve as amended.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Very good. Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Very good. Thank you. Very good. Moving on from item 5 to item 6, public comment. I don't have any public comment in front of me, none tonight. Thank you. Moving on from item 6 to item 7, our Director of Manager report, and we'll have that from our housing manager, Mr. Peter Noonan.
Good evening. I'd like to take a moment to review the look-ahead calendar for the commission on upcoming at your next 3 meetings, the June 13th, June 27th, and July 11th. We do have appeals scheduled. We have 1 on the 13th and then 2 on the 27th and on the 11th. At this time, we have the study session scheduled on July 25th. And for those commissioners that haven't been through a study session before, this is a non-televised meeting. We don't hold appeals at the meeting. What the commission does is it comes down onto the floor and we sit at tables and we discuss items. It is a public hearing. It's just not televised. We have had a request from one of the commissioners that we move the meeting so that all commissioners could potentially attend, and that would be moving it to the August 22nd meeting. At this time, we do have 2 appeals now on the August 8th date, and so in commission comments, perhaps if you could indicate if if you're not able to make the August 22nd meeting, or if you wouldn't be in favor of moving the study session to the August 22nd date. If not, we can just move that down, and then we'll go ahead and schedule appeals on the July 25th meeting. That's my report.
Thank you.
What's the comment that you made? You're saying is there someone that's not able to make the July 25th meeting?
In your comments, perhaps in your commission comments, if you would just indicate if you wouldn't be in support of moving the study session to the August 22nd meeting, that would help us.
So it's not the commissioners had indicated they would not be present that day. It's just that it'd be.
Yeah, we're not canceling a commission meeting. At this point, we're not canceling a meeting. We're just suggesting that we move the item that's on the meeting to another date.
I was on that track wondering if we might want to cancel one of the 3 meetings between July 25th, August 8th, and August 22nd, since it's summertime and for travels, especially if on July 25th, if we end up moving the study session and not having anything on the agenda that we have to do, like an appeal, and we know that at least one other commissioner would be absent. If we if other people are going to travel too, I'd like to be able to visit family for longer, but I would otherwise schedule it around the RSC meeting so that I can have the 3 absences you can have a year for work travel and in case of sickness.
For the commission's consideration, while you're in your comments, I've been informed we can't schedule appeals for the July 25th meeting. We cannot.
Okay. Commissioners, any further question or comment? Okay. Very good. We'll move on from item 7 to item 8, commission comments.
I have one. I would like to congratulate Commissioner Topshin and Chair Charity for their reappointment, and I would like to thank the mayor for my reappointment.
Congratulations, Commissioner Maggio. Commissioners, further comment?
I do.
Yes, thank you.
I wanted to bring thanks to our legal counsel, Allison. I don't want to disclose person's full name, but John S. is a friend of mine who went through, evidently, it was nearly a 10-year process. He was elbowed out of his building by a landlord who was, I'll just say, not unfamiliar to staff. And the landlord then re-rented the unit out at market rate, and it was a 10-year process, and he could not say enough good things about your assistance through the entire process, making sure he understood everything, understood the process, had the tools he needed to complete this. So from John S. and from the rest of the community, I want to thank you for your service.
And Commissioners, I just want to let you know on the upcoming calendar, I will be out June 27th. It's my brother's birthday, and I'll be in New York City.
Did you say June 22nd?
June 27th. Yeah, the June 27th meeting. Our family's visiting my brother, just so you know. Okay, that's it for commission comments. We'll move on to tonight's appeals. Very good. Okay, moving on from item 8 to item 9, our appeals. We'll start with item 9A, our first appeal. This is D-4394. The address is 1201 Crescent Heights Boulevard, Unit 305. This appeal was filed by Mr. Michael Pendergrast. Mr. Pendergrast, the tenant, are you present? Very good, thank you. And the property owner would be opposing this appeal. Is it a representative from the property here this evening? Yes, you are. Okay, very good, thank you. At this time, we'll have our report on this appeal from our legal counsel, Ms. Allison Regan.
Thank you. Michael Pendergast has lived in Unit 305 since March 2011 and pays rent of $1,447 per month. He applied for a rent reduction for, among other things, a malfunctioning elevator. The hearing examiner denied a rent reduction for this housing service, and Mr. Pendergast has timely appealed. Staff recommends that the Commission reverse and remand the hearing examiner's decision. The record is insufficient to determine whether the elevator is in sufficiently good working order such that the tenants are not entitled to a greater rent reduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Regan. Commissioners, any questions or comment?
Just a quick thing in the summary of evidence and the analysis on page 11, it mentions the guidelines value elevator service in the range of $10 to $60, which is actually currently it's between $11 and 67 cents, for the record, just slightly higher.
Thank you.
I have one question. On page 58 of our record, it says, probably mispronounced his name, Mr. Sudler, the elevator has been on a Mills Act contract fix-it list since 2012. So my question for staff is, does a Mills Act contract repair in any way differ from a regular maintenance? Because this to me is a mechanical issue, and Mills Act to me would be like if they were changing the aesthetics of a historic elevator. So is the maintenance of a mechanical issue in a building any different under Mills Act than under a standard off building?
That's a great question, and that would probably be part of the development of the record. I don't know.
Okay. And then secondly, is this the only elevator? Is there just one elevator for the building that wasn't indicated in the record?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner O'Keefe.
The staff report had recommended that we remand the case, and I think this is the first, this would be the first that we remand since I've been on the commission. And I was just wondering, I didn't remember seeing anything about the option of remanding in the ordinance or in the regulations. It mentions the possibility of de novo. Could you just explain, where that authority comes from and if that has happened before?
It has many times, and it's part of the regulations. I can point that out to you. So on page 45, it's Regulation 60035A, the Commission action on appeal. The Rent Stabilization Commission shall make a decision on a properly filed appeal affirming, reversing, modifying, or remanding the determination of a hearing examiner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Regan. Commissioners, any further comments or questions? Very well. So for our parties this evening, I'll explain the rules of engagement to you. Mr. Pendergast, as the appealing party, you have 5 minutes total to speak. However, you can divide your time. For instance, you can say you'd like maybe 2 minutes in the beginning and 3 minutes to rebut your opposing party's oral argument. So when you begin speaking, please come to the microphone and please talk directly in there so we can hear you. You can let the secretary know if you'd like to divide your time, and then you can begin speaking, and she'll keep time for you. So please come forward, Mr. Tommy.
I would like to divide my time in half, if possible. 2 minutes and then 3 at the end would work. I appreciate you hearing this matter. My name is Michael Pendergast. I live at 1201 North Crescent Heights, apartment 305. Been there since 2011, and ever since I can remember, I've had issues. The entire building has had issues with this elevator in regards to it not stopping evenly on the floor. Many times 4-5 inches above the floor. When I get into the elevator and push 3, the elevator will not go to the floor that's called. The elevator, sometimes when I push a floor, the door will close and then reopen on the same floor without having moved anywhere. It'll do that multiple times. I believe that there was sufficient evidence that this is not a sporadic problem, but a problem that happens all the time. I know you will not hear any new evidence, but even this month, 4 or 5 times already, the elevator has not, I've had issues as recently as today and yesterday with those 3 issues. And I think that the fact that this has been ongoing for so long is evidence that even though the elevator repair company may come out to service it, they're obviously not addressing the issue in full. And I believe in the analysis portion, it states that even the building owner acknowledges these issues and stated that they were going to be doing an overhaul of the elevator system. But to my knowledge, none of that has happened yet, and I just don't think that we should be paying for an elevator that does not work. Thank you.
Before you leave, commissioners, do you have any questions?
I got a question, Chair.
Can you clarify, is there 1 or 2 elevators?
There is 1 elevator, yes.
And was the elevator working well when you moved in 2011?
From what I can remember, I've had issues since I can remember with the elevator, so I don't think it was.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Topchi.
Thank you, Chair. You indicated in your appeal form there are 40 units and there are elderly and disabled residents that are unable to safely use the elevators. Do you know how many elderly or disabled people are in the building, roughly?
At the time, I don't currently know. I know that there is a very elderly lady on my floor, floor 3, and I see her climbing the stairs all the time because the elevator is not in work.
Have you noticed any people in a wheelchair? Are there any residents in the wheelchair?
There used to be a gentleman, Skip Lowe, on the 2nd floor who had a walker who would take a long amount of time to come up the stairs with his walker. That was before this owner owned the building, but these problems have been.
But clearly there are elderly and disabled people residing in the building.
And especially since the building is so old and a lot of these people have been there for a long time, there's becoming more elderly people that I feel really sorry for them.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Did you testify to those facts when you testified to the hearing examiner, that there were elderly and disabled people there? Did that come
I
up?
believe I did at the time, yes.
And do you know if you testified as to what happens? It sounds like, from what we have in the written record, that if you push a button, sometimes it just doesn't come to the third floor at all. Did you testify as to how long you've waited when it never comes? And if so, how long was that?
It doesn't ever come when that happens. I can tell that the elevator is not currently in service when I'm hitting the button because the light isn't on. So it's just sitting somewhere on a floor or in between floors, and it's just not coming when called. And it won't come. So I end up having to take the stairs, and then later on that night, the next day, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So
Commissioners, any further questions? Very good, thank you.
thank you, I appreciate it.
Next, we'll have an opposing oral argument from the property owner or a representative. So when you speak, please state your name and your relationship to the building so we have it for the record, and you'll have 5 uninterrupted minutes to speak.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, my name is Andrew Cerna. I'm also the property manager and also a tenant of the building, and I've actually been a tenant since 2011. So I've also had a very lengthy time at this particular building. We've had various issues with the building, pertaining to the elevator. It is an old building, and it's an old elevator built in 1931. We do have a elevator company that services it every month. They are on a retainer, so at any time that the elevator goes down, notices go up that there's been, an elevator service has been called, and it will be back up and running as soon as it possibly can. I don't ever notice that it exceeds any more than 24 hours. They usually come out on an emergency call anytime I need them to come out. So for the most part, it's always taken care of within 24 hours. Occasionally on the issues that the tenant had brought up, there's different issues on why the elevator might not come up. It could be because somebody else is holding it on another floor, because they might be bringing in packages, or they're bringing down laundry, or for whatever reason, they might be transferring stuff from the elevator to the garage. The elevator goes all the way to the garage, all the way up to the 5th floor. It is the only elevator in the building. Other times where it might not come to the floor that you're calling is because somebody else is calling it from another floor, which will cause a delay and sometimes cause the elevator not to come up until it reaches that party that's calling for it, takes them where they want to go, and then when the tenant will have to push the button again in order for it to come down to the floor that they're calling for. As far as the elevator level, to my knowledge, since I've also resided there, it's never been level. It's always been maybe 3 inches off of the floor. We've had our TRE look at the elevator, and they've tried to level it as much as they possibly can, and adjust, the brakes and all that stuff. To my knowledge, that's also been in the record that the service requests, the amount of service calls that we've, had called for it, the repairs that, we have done to make sure that it's in compliance and it's, within code. We've taken those measures as well. Sometimes there'll be issues with the doors because sometimes tenants will think that the elevator cab is on that floor, so they'll pull on it, which will, over time, cause wear and tear on the contacts. They're not noticing that it's not on their floor, or people that don't know our building and our visitors will pull, on the door and, cause the door to, cause the sensors to, obviously have problems with the contact. But to my knowledge, I took the elevator today. I take the elevator pretty much every single day. I have a dog that I live on the 4th floor. I have a dog I have to take down, every couple of hours so that they can, use the restroom. But it's always working. I took it down today and it was working.
Thank you, that was your time. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Maggio.
The Tri-Elevator Corporation is the company that services this elevator, is that correct?
TRE, yes.
TRE. And have they serviced it since you've been there, 11?
They come every month.
And have you ever, or the owners, have they ever tried to get a company that might specialize in these older elevators? Or,
This particular TRE elevators has been around for a very long time. In fact, they were servicing the elevator with the prior owner and the prior owner to that. The prior owner to this owner obviously was another owner. This is a new owner, relatively new owner, but we've been servicing it. They've been servicing this building since 3 owners ago.
all right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
I'm wondering what the 3 service calls were for in December of 2018, if you testified to that at the prior hearing, and if it wouldn't be new evidence.
I know of one service call that I called on, and that was because of a loose contact on the second floor. So
What is a loose contact?
it's the contact that will call so that when the elevator closes, it can't be opened from any other elevator door on the floor. So when that contact is, when people pull or tenants pull on that door, not realizing that that elevator is not on that floor, though you could see, because there's a glass, you could see that there's a light on, but people will still just pull it because they're either opening up their mail or text messaging or something. They'll just pull on it thinking that it's there, but it's not. And then, after a certain time and period, it starts to, people keep pulling on it, it starts to get loose, and then that's when we have to call for service. The majority of the time most of the time that I call for service, it's because either somebody's pulling the door and either bringing in, really big items and such, that they pull the door and they push it all the way out, that it kind of causes the door not to close properly. So every month we have it serviced, and then I take the elevator pretty much every single day, morning throughout the day, because I'm there pretty much most of the time. But it just really depends on people knowing that elevator, that it's an old elevator, and when you're going to use it, just use it like a normal door. It's just open it and then close it.
Has the management company notified tenants of that? Do you have a sign up on the door?
Informing them what? To close the door properly?
That it'll stop functioning if they don't?
No, the
carefully
only
close it?
sign, to be honest with you, is a sign that has been there since even before the owners that are managing now. It was the old owners through Wilshire Skyline, where they put on a note at the very bottom of the basement that the floor is not even with the landing. So just to be careful, watch your step. That's the only sign that I know of. And then the signs that I would put when the elevator is not in service, or when we're restaining it, or we're doing, cosmetic work to it. The only notices that I would normally post.
In the record before the hearing examiner, we have a quote from the landlord that the LLC is finalizing an agreement to completely overhaul the elevator. Are we to understand that the LLC is looking at replacing and, putting in a new elevator? What does that mean?
Yeah, I believe so, and I believe that they've already entered the permits for that, and so that is something that the new ownership has actually taken the ball with, and is starting to implement that and starting to get that rolling for the property.
Okay.
This is from the old owner.
Commissioners? Yes.
Yes, I have a question.
Sure.
Can you square for us the testimony that you gave or the statements that you made a minute ago that the elevator basically works well with the need to replace it? Why would we be replacing an elevator if, as you say, it works well enough and it's worked well since you've lived there?
Well, I'm not saying that it works perfectly well. There's been issues, most certainly, where it doesn't, like I said before, somebody could be calling for it and it doesn't actually come when you call for it, because somebody else from a different floor might be calling at the same exact time you're calling for the elevator, which causes the elevator to get confused. It doesn't know where to go. So I, for the record, will always say that there has been issues, and every issue that we've taken care of, we've called TRE, they come out. Their service fee is $650 for them to come out. And even though it's $650, if that elevator's down, the owners make sure that they get called.
I can also,
Sorry.
Sam K1 Farm, one of the owners of the building. So to answer your question of why, we just took over the building, so we are taking measures to update everything in the building and modernize it as much as possible. And in terms of when we signed on 2019, we actually signed an agreement for a new elevator. So it's part of the renovations that we're doing to overhaul the building and bring it to as new standards as possible.
Okay. And obviously, we have to make a ruling based on the condition it's in today, but I do appreciate the fact that, as you stated, you're trying to keep the building in a better state, so I appreciate that.
Commissioner Maggio?
One more question. When is the projected time to get this elevator changed or fixed?
We're given an estimate about 12 weeks.
So within 12 weeks, there should be a new elevator there.
I didn't deal with the contract directly, my partner has, but we're given a quote of 12 weeks.
Thank you very much.
So the 12 weeks period is to replace or fix the current one?
That would be replaced.
That's to
It will
replace.
be replaced.
Yeah, I believe I was told that the parts are being ordered.
Commissioners, anything further? Okay, very good.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
I also have a comment that in terms of the
Well,
elderly.
let me just, I think we can only we can only have you respond to questions, unfortunately, because you had 5 minutes. Thank you. Mr. Pendergast, you have remaining 3 minutes, I believe, right, to rebut.
Thank you. I appreciate Mr. Cerna's testimony and the fact that they have called out the elevator service company, but if the fact that these same issues have been going on so consistently and over such a long period of time through multiple owners, you know, makes me wonder why they would be going with the same elevator company if they can't fix an issue. You know, and I completely understand that they are new in ownership of the building, but I've been dealing with this elevator for years, and it's the same thing as it always has been. And I have no knowledge of the repairs or the services that they make. I just know that when I go to the elevator and I have the same issue day after day, it's very, very frustrating. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Commissioners, no question. Very good. Okay, Commissioners, we're now done with oral argument and open for deliberation. And if anyone would like to start, please jump in. Commissioner Topchin.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I can start. Well, I'm just going to mention that in my opinion, there is no dispute that the elevator is not functioning properly, and there are major issues there that have to be addressed. And if the new ownership is going to replace, that's going to be probably the best solution. But we have to deal with the current condition of the elevator, and on the record, there is no dispute that the elevator is not properly working. So my concern is that obviously they're in the building, there are 40 units, and as the tenant mentioned in the testimony and also in the appeal form, there are elderly and disabled people in the building, and I'm also concerned about the safety of, of those residents who cannot safely use the elevator service. So I'm in agreement with staff that the amount of the rent decrease should be revised, and this should be remanded back to the hearing examiner to include for further development of the record and see if the condition would the current condition of the elevator reflects that $6.50 rent reduction is the correct amount of rent decrease. I don't believe so. And before me is the suggested valuation guidelines for the elevator services that starts with the $11, and the range is between $11 and $67, pardon me. So obviously I'm not the examiner. I don't know what was the reason and why the examiner decided $6.50 would be the corresponding rent decrease. I strongly disagree with such low amount of the rent decrease. This is a major service. This creates a major safety and inconvenience to the tenants, and that should adequately reflect the correct value of the service that is not available to the tenants, the amount of the rent decrease. So I don't believe that in my personal belief that we should not look into what was determined in 10 years in prior cases. Each case is different. Each set of facts would be different. I don't understand why the examiner had to look into the case from 2011 if I'm not mistaken, 2007 or 2009. It doesn't really matter, to come up with with a dollar amount for this rent decrease. I strongly disagree, and I strongly urge the commission to support the decision to remand it back to the examiner to review the record and maybe to increase it to the higher amount. And quite frankly, I don't understand why it has to be always the lower range used for the determination of the reduction of services by the examiners and not the higher range. So again, but that's up to the examiner, and I was just going to, I want to have it on the record that the examiner should look into the range that is given currently on the guidelines and maybe use the reasonable amount. 650 is not reasonable for the loss of such important service. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner O'Keefe?
I had a couple questions and a couple comments. I think that the decreases in place are for two specific problems with the elevator. One of them being the not landing flush with the floor, and the other being it being noisy. So I don't think the two that are in place are for the question of it malfunctioning regularly and not going to a floor at all. Is that correct, staff?
Right. The current rent reduction was imposed in the earlier decision, and so the hearing examiner was noting that that rent reduction is already in place.
Okay. And then another question is, I think a question was raised of how it was functioning in 2011. My understanding is this is not a substantial reduction of housing services question, it's a code violation, and if the elevator is not functioning properly, it's a code violation, so it doesn't matter if it was working or not in 2011. Is that correct? Okay, so for my opinion, I'd say we don't need to remand the case. I believe the staff recommendation was to remand it for purposes of having an inspector look at it. I think there's enough evidence on the record that the elevator is not functioning properly. I would be inclined to just outright overturn the decision. We see that there's 3 different service calls in the period of 7 days. It can take as long as 24 hours for somebody to come. That means that elderly and disabled people cannot come and go. There's testimony that it's repeatedly not working. It doesn't seem like it's contradicted. The suggestion, I think, was that an inspector comes, but if an inspector comes, I don't think anybody's asserting it never works. So the chance that an inspector would come and it would just happen to be not working at that time isn't necessarily dispositive. It sounds like there's, and we see here it says on page 59, the record is insufficient to show that the elevator is always broken. Always broken when it does not respond to a call. I don't think the question is it always broken? It sounds like there's been a consistent pattern of people not being able to have a workable elevator, which can cause people who are elderly and disabled to have to go upstairs, which is unhealthy. So I would say I would just overturn it. And I think the valuations were for the noisiness and not landing flush. And if there's an elevator that's not coming at all when it's called and causing people to potentially be homebound or have to move to get access, then I think it would be close to, if not entirely, the valuation of $67. What do you do if you can't get to your house? And I understand it's not necessarily the fault of the landlord, they're trying to fix it, but in a sense that just reiterates the fact that it's not working now and it needs to be repaired and people need a consistently working elevator.
Thank you very much. Commissioners on this side, what do you think?
I'm torn. Based on
yeah, me too.
my long pause there. My first inclination is to agree with staff. I think Commissioner O'Keefe's recommendation is not necessarily wrong. I think we could potentially make a ruling without going that step, but I think what sending it back does is allow the record to be cleaned up and to really let the hearing examiner determine what the actual basis is for an amount. And especially with a range from 10 to 60, there really needs to be a lot of evidence heard about why we're going with 10, 15, 30, 60. But like I said, I'm torn. But I would go with the staff's recommendation if we were voting this minute.
Commissioner Maggio?
Well, it definitely is a big loss, and there's no doubt that it is unreliable and, of course, unsafe if it's not, even when it stops at a floor that's unsafe. And of course, it has to be a priority, and I'm not really too sure about the dollar amount. The comment of a normal door, I mean, maybe this is normal for this particular elevator, but I don't think it's normal for a working elevator. And so it's very clear it isn't working well. I know that if I was a guest in this building, I would have to be told ahead of time to take the stairs, because no way am I going to get in that elevator and be stuck. And I know in my own particular building, and it's a new building, once the elevator one was out for 5 weeks, and they had to carry some people down. And it's imperative that it's done. It should have been done long ago. That isn't the issue here, I know. So I'm not sure about the dollar amount. I think maybe that needs more discussion.
Commissioner Bergstein?
I'll be voting in favor of staff's recommendation. This is a consistent problem. I mean, I'm pleased to hear that the owners have an elevator company that responds to service calls, but this goes beyond, a boiler that goes out once every 6 months. This seems to be a consistent issue with this elevator. Company responds, but it does not get repaired, or gets a temporary fix. The manager, in his comments tonight, said that, it's always been this way. That's not an excuse for the elevator not functioning properly. That gap in the flooring is a trip and fall hazard. I have some mobility issues, and that would make me nervous to have the only elevator in the building not be flush with the floor. If I've got packages in my hand, I might trip and fall. I'm surprised there hasn't been more issues with that. Page 41 of our packet, Mr. Nissel, I think, the owner stated that replacing the entire mechanical system would be expensive. I find that to be irrelevant. It's a housing service, although I do agree with Commissioner O'Keefe, it is a code violation, but it's a housing service that must be maintained. So what the cost of that is not relevant to our proceedings tonight. On page 58, I'm going to butcher this name, K1 Farm, said the LSC is finalizing an agreement to completely overhaul the elevator. The gentleman from the owner says the same thing. That's great, and if that does happen, if the elevator is replaced, the owner can always move for a restoration of rent after that point in time when they can prove that that issue is no longer at hand. I find the valuation of $6.50 to be very low for this key issue of the one elevator. If there was a bank of elevators, there was 4 elevators, and only one of them wasn't working, perhaps, but it's the only elevator for the building, and that's a significant issue when the tenants have to use the stairs or might be trapped in their own homes because they can't get up and down with the wheelchair. But I don't feel comfortable in our making that decision here about what that valuation should be. I'm much more comfortable with your recommendation that there needs to be more in the record from the hearing examiner to determine how we would appropriately address that dollar amount. So I will be voting in favor of staff's recommendations to remand this back to the hearing examiner.
So we had Commissioner Topshian first, and then Commissioner O'Keefe.
I just heard the Commissioner O'Keefe spoke after me, and and you convinced me that maybe in this particular case, maybe we don't really need to remand it when there is enough record. There is enough evidence that the elevator is not functioning. So what's the point of sending the inspector to verify that, and maybe on the day of the inspector's visit, the elevator will be working? And obviously that would probably reflect on the possible different decision by the examiners. So because there's enough testimony that suggests that the elevator is not working and has not been working for years, and there is an issue, and that's the reason why the current owner wants to replace it. So I'm actually in favor of Commissioner O'Keefe's recommendation to follow that, to reverse the examiner's decision, maybe. And I just want to point out that the reason why I completely disagree with the amount, and the commission is charged with the authority to make a determination, and we've done that previously, to make a determination on the amount of the rent decrease if we disagree with the examiner, and that is supported by the regulations, section 60041 point B. In evaluating the amount of rent decrease that may reasonably compensate the tenant, the hearing examiner or the Rent Stabilization Commission on appeal may consider the extent to which the reduction in services affects the tenants of a given rental unit, the relative significance of the reduced service in relation to the safety, health, convenience, and comfort of the tenants. So we have the whole packet before us. I think the elevator service in this building, it's a crucial service, and it must work properly all the time. So we have the evidence it's not working. So therefore, I would actually feel comfortable to reverse the examiner's decision and maybe even make a determination here on the amount of rent increase. And I'm fine with the $67 as currently the suggested guidelines show.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
There seems to be some thinking that if we were to remand it, it would be to decide the value, and that's not how the resolution reads. The resolution says the record is insufficient to determine whether the elevator is in sufficiently good working order such that the tenants are not entitled to a greater rent reduction. That's the draft resolution. So if people think it would be kicked back for purpose of us not being able to determine the valuation, it was written that the question hasn't been resolved whether or not it's in good working order, and I think that it has been, and I think that there's not substantial evidence that it's not in good working order, that we've heard very strong evidence that it is. So I'm wondering, since I'm not, or maybe I'm missing it, or not remembering it, but have we, staff, found before evaluation of an elevator that's not in good working order? Is that something that there's standard valuation for that we found in other cases?
I don't know. That would be something the hearing examiner would look at.
Okay.
Just to put my cards on the table, I'm more in favor of remanding the case, just because I do feel that I don't have a great factual workup on exactly, what rent reduction to award the tenants if we do overturn the decision. I mean, it's my understanding if we're overturning the decision that we need to come up with some type of valuation, and we have to debate that number here at this dais, and I'm not prepared to debate it based on the record. I have an idea about how much the elevator is working or not working. I know I wouldn't get in it, but I'm a New Yorker that has a bit of bias with elevators. So I guess all I can say is that I'm in favor of I'm more towards Commissioner Martz and Bergstein and Maggio to remand the case.
I have a question for Rob. Did we want to explore any further your question about the Mills Act? And
No,
if
I don't
that
think that's
had any-
relevant to the proceedings.
If it maybe has any importance?
I don't think it's relevant. I think the Mills Act to me would mean if they were changing the aesthetics of the elevator, but the mechanical would be just the mechanical. And to your point, just our resolution states that the hearing examiner's decision in D-4394 is remanded to consider whether the elevator's malfunctioning has resulted in the elimination of this housing service, which would warrant a corresponding rent reduction. To me, that is remanding it back to the hearing examiner to look at the rent reduction a second time. So I'm prepared to make a motion.
I mean, I'm happy to hear more conversation. I think we have a consensus for remanding, but if you'd like to say further.
It sounds like you do have a consensus. I just want to make sure people realize that that is what it says. Summary under 1, it says the commissioner remands it. The record is insufficient to determine whether it is in insufficiently good working order such that the tenants are not entitled to a greater rent reduction. And at the very end, it says that the commission remands it for further development of the record and suggests the city inspector inspect the condition and operation of the elevator. And it also says it's unclear from the record how often the elevator malfunctions and whether tenants are in fact deprived of this amenity because of its unreliability. So it is focused on still thinking that there is no resolution on if the elevator doesn't work. And so if you adopt the resolution as it is, essentially it's saying that.
And I can appreciate that. I think we know for sure that the elevator has a problem stopping level at the floors. I mean, even in tonight's testimony, I didn't hear that people have been stuck on the elevator. I didn't hear people, had to be, called and pried out of the elevator. So and if maybe that's there, but maybe we just don't have it in the record. So, I mean, to award the highest level rent reduction, for me, I'm just not prepared to do it because I didn't hear that there's no elevator.
Alice, could I ask you to weigh in on the language in the draft resolution? Seems to be, I'm getting a different reading on it than Commissioner O'Keefe is. If we adopt this draft resolution,
I just want to see the resolution. It should be the same, but I think I have, yeah. I think I put some bullet points at the top. Right, so the findings are at the top. So I think, Commissioner Bergstein, you read that bullet point at the top?
Correct.
Yeah, that's
okay.
what we would be doing.
So I'm prepared to make a motion to adopt Resolution RSC 19-522, a resolution of the city.
552.
552, thank you, Commissioner Vice Chair Bergstein. A resolution of the Rent Stabilization Commission of the City of West Hollywood, remanding the hearing examiner's decision on D-4394, address 1201 North Crescent Heights Boulevard, Unit 305.
Second.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Ms. Regan, if, well, it seems like it's going to be remanded, but if it goes back to the examiner for further development, and if the parties disagree, they still can appeal to the commission that decision?
Yes, of course.
All right, it's not final. There is a chance that that can come back to us.
Yes.
Very good,
All
thank you. So at this time, we have a motion on the table. Secretary Barrino, may we have a roll call or a vote?
Commissioner O'Keefe? No. Commissioner Maggio?
Yes.
Commissioner Martz?
Yes.
Commissioner Topchian?
No.
Vice Chair Bergstein?
Aye.
Chair Charity?
Yes. Thank you very much. So this does pass. Parties, if you have any questions, please refer those to our staff. At this time, we'll be moving from Appeal 9A to 9B. This appeal is D-4399, the address 8304 Clinton Street, Unit 5. This appeal was filed by the tenant, David Spiro. Mr. Spiro, are you present? Thank you very much. I don't see anybody from the property address in the audience, so we will go to our staff report from our legal counsel, Ms. Allison Regan.
Thank you. Tenant David Spiro has lived in Unit 5 at 8304 Clinton Street since September 1997 and currently pays $924.18 per month in rent. He asked for a determination of the maximum allowable rent and whether there has been rent retained in excess of the MAR. The hearing examiner found that the MAR is the initial rent of $600 and that the landlord has retained rent in excess of the MAR in the amount of $5,069.27. This amount does not include the period between November 2015 and November 2017 because the tenant had not submitted proof of the rent paid during that period. The hearing examiner then left the record open until January 31st to allow the tenant to submit that evidence, but because she did not receive that evidence, she made her determination based on the submission at the hearing. Staff recommends that the commission remand the hearing examiner's decision to consider the tenant's evidence from that missing time period. In his appeal, the tenant claims that he did submit this evidence as requested before the deadline, but unfortunately the email that accompanied the documents did not make it to its destination, and he has proof, which was submitted with his appeal, that he did in fact submit the email and evidence on time. So since he complied with the hearing examiner's request, staff recommends that this evidence be considered on remand. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Commissioners, questions first, our counsel?
So would it mean we need to remand it for it to be considered? Is that what you're saying? Thank you.
Commissioner
Just
Topchian?
just a question. Mr. Regan, if the examiner requests additional record, we see that the email was sent to Angelov. I don't know who's that person. Is that it's just a staff member or is the examiner or?
So in the hearing examiner's order, when she kept the record open, she asked the tenant to submit the evidence to those people. And so.
Specifically to-
Specifically, and there's an email from Ms. Angeloff to Ms. Sherman indicating that she didn't receive the information, and then Mr. Spiro has explained why.
I see. Okay, thank you.
But it also says that it was sent to Anwar, right? And he has the same answer that he didn't receive it. All right, thank you.
Commissioners, further questions? Very well. Mr. Spiro, you'll have 5 uninterrupted minutes to present your oral argument.
Thank you. So I can answer the question which has been brought forth by the commissioners, which was why the email was not received. The email, because these were checks for a 3-year period, I did not have the canceled checks, so I submitted copies of my bank statements. The attachment was 84 pages in PDF form, and when I followed up after receiving the decision from the hearing officer, I was told that because it was a large attachment, very often they are just bounced from the system, which is why Anwar did not receive it, nor did Ms. Angeloff. And so when I asked what I should do, they said I should deliver copies of this in person and file an appeal, which I did. I'd also like to add that since the decision was issued on February 21st, 2019, I have continued to pay the full original rent rather than the reduced amount by the hearing officer, because there was a little bit of uncertainty which way I should go. So I have continued to pay the original amount, so I would ask that when this reevaluation is done, that be taken into consideration, which was also part of the staff summary.
Thank you very much.
I think that's it.
Commissioners, further questions?
Yes, sir,
Yes.
when you delivered this paperwork, you delivered it to the City Hall?
On the appeal was delivered in person, correct.
Who did you hand it to?
You have it in your attachments in the agenda packet, but I gave it to the clerk.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, further questions? Very good.
One quick one. Just curious, I know that occasion, of course, it's only when I have really critical emails, it doesn't send, and it kind of gets hung up in my out box. I don't know if your email has it. Did you ever check to see if that email was hung up in that out box, or was it delivered from your end?
I was shown on my end that it was that it went out, not necessarily a receipt returned back, but it did go out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioners, further? Nothing further? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we're open to deliberation.
Just a quick question, Ms. Regan. This is I don't remember anything similar to this before. By the tenant's testimony, he emailed, but the attachment was so large that maybe the city's computer system or whatever system we have probably protecting the some incoming emails, etc. So maybe, maybe that's the reason why, because of the large attachment, it didn't reach the destination. So under that circumstance, is it still considered the tenant's compliance with the examiner's demand, because it didn't reach the final destination?
I think because he submitted it in a timely manner, he obviously can't control what
Okay.
happens on the city's computers. So that's why the recommendation is what it is.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
I think I would be inclined to just add a little bit and say it's remanded to consider whether the email was in fact submitted, and then assuming it was, consider the evidence regarding the rent overcharges. I mean, I know we see the email here, but it doesn't show it's definitely from a sent folder. I don't have reason to think it's not, but we're not the hearing examiner, so I would just be inclined to say the hearing examiner will first look at was it actually sent, and then second, assuming it was sent, they'll look at the tenant's evidence about the rent overcharges. And also, it looked like from the exchange we had that usually the landlord is given 3 days to respond, so presumably they also have to consider any response that the landlord has, if that's standard procedure.
Chair, I'm curious to know not only the fact that it maybe was not received, but then it was delivered in person. What happened to it then?
It was delivered to file the appeal. not for the hearing examiner's consideration, is what I gathered, yeah.
All right.
It was delivered later, yeah, after the fact. Mhm. Commissioner Martz?
I am in support of the staff's recommendation. I think the hearing examiner's job is to consider whether evidence is truthful or not. They can always reject it. So I don't think we should put the onus on the tenant who has come here in good faith. The landlord has not shown up. So I don't think directing them to consider the credibility of the tenant here is supported by the record. Staff has said they didn't get it. The tenant said they sent it. I believe, don't quote me, I'm not a tech expert, but when you send something, it doesn't get that timestamp on it until it actually goes out of your outbox. But I just don't think that we should be micromanaging the hearing examiner's duties that much. They're in a better position to determine whether this person here is telling the truth or not. And the landlord will have the chance to rebut that.
Commissioner Maggio or Vice Chair Bergstein? Mr. Spyro, AOL, we've got to upgrade this email. But I'm also in favor of remanding and reaffirming the resolution recommended by staff.
I can make a motion, Mr. Chair. Motion to adopt a resolution of the Rent Stabilization Commission of the City of West Hollywood remanding the hearing examiner's decision on application D-4399 pertaining to the property located at 8304 Clinton Street, apartment number 5.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I will second that.
Thank you very much. Secretary Barino, may we have the vote?
Commissioner O'Keefe,
Aye.
Commissioner Maggio,
Aye.
Commissioner Martz,
Aye.
Commissioner Topchian,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bergstein,
Aye.
Chair Charity.
Aye. Very well. Thank you. Good. It passes. If you have any questions, please refer them to staff. We're moving on from item 9, our appeals, to item 10, public comment. I have no public comment. Moving on from item 10 to item 11, commission comments.
Yes, I just want to report back that I did attend the Public Safety Award meeting. The chair was there as well, and he gave a report on our inspection, the STEP program, and I agreed to be his fill-in when he is not able to attend.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Maggio.
I have a comment. I'll out myself as a person who's unavailable on the study session day. I'm going to be in Croatia. So piggybacking on Commissioner O'Keefe's comment, if people are in favor or willing to move the study session to the 22nd and then canceling the 25th since we can't do appeals on that date, that would be obviously best for me, but whatever the commission deems best.
I had one more. Peter, were you going to report on the hearing and remedy packet, or can I ask you questions on this now, or this was in our packet?
Yes, it was in your packet. We can perhaps talk after the meeting if you had specific questions about it.
All right, thank you.
So I'm fine with accommodating Commissioner Martz being away. I just want to hear from other commissioners. I'm available on the 22nd as well.
I'm available either date.
I'm a little hesitant to move the study session from the 25th since we can't, we would be unable to move any of our appeals to that day. If we do end up moving it, I would request that staff put at least one agenda item on there from our previous study session. I'm not in favor of, at this point, canceling a meeting this summer. I kind of like to wait and see if we have more appeals come up or how we come up from the study session. So I would be more in favor of leaving the study session on the 25th and leaving those 3 meetings on calendar, 25th, August 8th, August 22nd, for the time being. If it turns out we have a lack of quorum at a later date, we could always cancel a meeting at that point in time. But at this point, I don't hear an issue being lack of quorum in any particular meeting.
I just wanted to ask, I felt that maybe staff had a preference. That was my interpretation. Was there a preference from staff on a specific date?
No preference. No preference.
Chair, if there's no preference, I'm in town. I'm not planning to leave. Either day would be good, or in any other day. But I strongly believe that we should accommodate to make sure that our new commissioners will be able to attend the study session. This is going to be the first time, so and maybe we can check the schedule and make sure that we, accommodate. So it would be really great. And this is the commission comments, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's one thing. And yeah, I was out of town. Commissioner Major mentioned that we were reappointed to the commission. Probably the last meeting yesterday on Monday. Yeah, I was after the festival. I took a couple of days off. So yeah, I just want to thank the council member who appointed me to this commission, Council Member Lauren Meister. I want to thank her for putting her trust in me, and it means a lot. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Keefe?
Just wondering, Commissioner Bergstein brought up the concern if we had appeals that would otherwise be scheduled on the 22nd and move the study session to that date, if that would be a problem. Would it be possible, if there were appeals that would otherwise be on the 22nd, to schedule them on the 8th, since we only have one then, or is there more time needed between the? Oh,
Yeah,
it's listed as one on the printout. That's right. You had mentioned two earlier on.
Yeah, and we don't have any appeals scheduled on the 22nd at this point. I think more importantly, as Commissioner Topshin mentioned, I think it's important and meaningful that all commissioners have the ability to participate in the study session, since the commission does that once a year.
As y'all know, I would be in favor of canceling on the 25th and moving the study session, but perhaps we could wait till later if folks prefer that as well.
And you can't be here on what date? The 22nd?
I'm sorry, are you
July
canceling,
25th,
moving the study session to August 22nd?
and
Is that what you're
canceling on the
saying? And then
25th was what I was.
What would you propose to do with the July 25th meeting?
Canceling it was my suggestion.
Because we can't hear appeals that day is what's going on.
But we could hear items from our last study session. I don't think we've covered all of the items from last year's study session.
Well, if there are no items, then we don't have to meet, right? So we can cancel. Well, I don't see if there is a reason if there are no items to discuss and staff is not prepared. So then I would say, why don't we just cancel it and schedule the study session at a later time? So
we have a few meetings before the 25th. I mean, I think everybody knows that I'm in favor of accommodating commissioners. So I'm in favor of accommodating Commissioner Martz. I'm in favor of accommodating Vice Chair Bergstein. So
Yeah, there are still a number. I'm looking at our Rent Stabilization Commission priorities for 2018, 2019. There's still a number on here that we have not yet covered. But I would agree, if we want to talk about moving the study session to the August meeting, and then at this time leave the July 25th on calendar, we can revisit that at our next meeting.
Have we considered even maybe moving it further up till September?
I'm sorry, what?
Moving it till September? If those two meetings are problematic.
The 22nd, I don't think, is an issue for anyone.
All right.
It's just what we do with the 25th of July.
we can develop what we'd like to do on the 25th and maybe flush that out. But at this time, we can all say pretty much affirmatively that we can move that study session to the 22nd. Do we need a motion or do we need a vote for anything?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we want to know if Commissioner Kirby's would be there as well? I think next meeting maybe.
Next meeting.
That makes sense. We shouldn't do it till we
Yeah.
know he can attend if the idea is to have everyone here.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So how do we want to do this, commissioners? Do we want to we can obviously just move it right back on the next meeting if we,
Could
if we
we
find out
ask staff what, and the only reason I say that is they schedule appeals, so if we want to put the 22nd as a placeholder for now so they don't schedule appeals on that date, and then
There you go.
I'm
Thank you,
getting
Commissioner
nods.
Martz.
Okay.
Very good. We'll go with that.
Is everyone, all the commissioners okay with that? Tentatively, the 22nd, we'll hold that out, and then
We'll hear from Josh Kirpies when
Yeah,
he returns.
I think it sounds reasonable, so we can put it tentatively on the calendar.
Very good.
thank you all for accommodating
Sure.
my travel.
Commissioners, further comment? Yes?
I have a question. Yesterday was the city council meeting, right, Peter? Peter, was it smoking in the unit? The ordinance was it? A next meeting. Okay, so I had it in my calendar. And I said probably missed that one because I really wanted to attend and maybe even speak in the comments portion. We probably not going to get any update until it is before the city council. Only after that, you'll probably provide some information.
Yeah, and in my comments at the end, I can give you a little bit more information on the item. I'm not being pensive on purpose here. And I just want to give the commissioners an opportunity to speak, and then I will cover that.
Okay. In the last probably comment, or I don't know how to put it. I remember a few years ago when we had the ad hoc committee to revisit the evaluation guidelines and the regulations regarding the reduction of services, rent decrease issues. We came up with this, with the updated version, kind of the evaluation guidelines. It's, and my personal belief that the examiners, based on my review of the cases that come before us, I believe they're always using the lower end of the range, and sometimes even below the range. So I understand it's very subjective. It's based on what the examiner sees. But is there any way we can really kind of address or maybe receive some information from staff, how the examiners, what they consider, how they review, how they come up with the amounts of the rent decrease? Because sometimes I see the amounts that are determined, they do not really reasonably reflect the value of the service itself, just like the case we had today. And I know we don't typically consider the rent amount, and I'm not talking about the rent level because each unit may have a different rent level, but all other components and the factors, it seems like in this case and many cases before we reviewed, it seems like the examiners, they're not really looking into those factors, how important is the service, the convenient and the comfort, etc. So I don't know what to do, how to deal with it, because each and every case that comes before me, it seems like I disagree with the amount of rent decrease, and I hate to basically at the every meeting saying that I disagree with the amount and I want to review it, I want to revisit it. So what would be your suggestion as a legal counsel and staff?
Well, I don't think you're going to like my answer. Unfortunately, that's the only role that the commission has, is when an issue comes on appeal, that's your one and only opportunity to review the hearing examiner's decision. One of the requirements of having a quasi-judicial proceeding is that the hearing examiner is independent. So we can't try to influence the hearing examiner. She has a copy of the regulations, and she's applying them in the way that she believes is appropriate, and trying to reach these valuations in a way that's objective and consistent across many different cases. I know that reading the regulations, it seems like there's a subjective component, but at the same time, it's supposed to be read in a way that is objective, so that can be applied across different factual scenarios consistently, so that it's not seen. I think as we've talked about before, sometimes someone's shade is another, someone's loss of sun is another person's gain of shade. And so I think she's trying to balance that, knowing that it's a difficult line to walk sometimes. So to the extent that those issues come to you, and that's the commission's opportunity to weigh in at that point.
What about maybe kind of, I don't know, recommending or suggesting not to really look into the cases like they were like 10 years ago, the examiners, made a determination on like in this case, in the case today, the elevator service was that the determination on the amount was based basically on the similar case back in 2007 or 2009.
I think you might have misunderstood
Maybe.
what actually the hearing examiner was doing. So that rent reduction was actually in place 10 years ago. So the case from however many years ago, that reduction was imposed at that time.
At the time.
And it still remains. And so the issue in front of her was not whether that rent reduction was appropriately decided. She was deciding on a different problem. So she was saying this rent reduction was in place for this problem, and so there's a claim of an additional problem. So does that
Right.
warrant a different rent reduction?
Okay, but in the other previous cases, there were some, there were cases where the examiner would make a decision based on the precedent in the prior cases. For a similar case, there was a rent reduction per se $10. So in this case, the suggested will be around the same amount. So is it possible to just avoid that and look into each case separately as a case facts are before you? It doesn't matter what happened 5, 10 years ago, or even a year ago in a different case, because it's a different set of facts and has nothing to do with the case that the examiner is reviewing right now.
So I think the reliance on precedent is, again, just for that sense of consistency. But I have seen the hearing examiner recognizing that precedent, but then updating the amount based on the updating of the guidelines. So I do think she is taking into consideration that those valuations change.
Unfortunately, I wish I would agree.
Sorry, I
with
can't
you,
give
but
you
I
a
don't
more
see that.
satisfactory answer. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I would just respond. I think, that does give us an opportunity, though. If we disagree with an amount, then we are free to say, wrong, she made the right decision on the facts of the case, but not on the amount. And I don't think the commission has necessarily been that willing to say that, but that doesn't mean that maybe in our study session we kind of flesh out our thinking on that, because I do agree that that can be an issue. At $3.50 doesn't really mean much to someone. So that's something that we can
Yeah, and for
consider.
some reason, the commission is not always willing to look into that, but as the regulation, when I mentioned today, 60041.b actually gives us that authority, and that section was added recently, recently saying a few years ago, and we have the authority to review and revisit and maybe change the amount of the rent decrease, and we should use it. We should do it if we believe that the amount does not correctly represent the value of the service. Thank you.
We have changed the evaluation in the past, I know that, and a couple years ago, were given a valuation booklet. And I think maybe we could ask staff, do you have that with you? Okay, good. Does
Yeah,
everyone?
we have a new.
It's the new one in here.
in the back. Yeah.
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 That's the one I didn't look further.
This is probably something that we can discuss at the study session. I just wanted to make a comment in the light of today's.
Yeah, it's a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
On the same topic, just to be clear though, if we're ever modifying the amount, it still needs to be within the range for the listed service, right? It's just a question of where it falls.
Thank you. Commissioners, further commission comments? Very well. Moving on from item 11 to item 12, staff comments.
Just a couple of short, quick comments. We do, on this next council meeting, have an item. I worked with code compliance on a report that's showcases a number of smoke-free programs in existence in different cities. This is the outgrowth of an item that was brought forward by Commissioner Bergstein some time ago, and the commission did look at it, made a recommendation to the council to explore this for West Hollywood. The council did look at that and asked staff to come back with an item that had more information. So that will be on the June 6th meeting. The way that the item is set up is it presents information on smoke-free programs in rent-stabilized jurisdictions. And then in general, it provides a lot of information on different programs that are just in existence out there. It recognizes that HUD in 2018 prohibited smoking in all HUD and all buildings with federal funding. And then it asks the council questions. And the first question is if the council would like to explore this for West Hollywood, and then if they would, what would they like the program to include? And so it is really set up as an exploratory report. It will be available in the agenda packet this next week when that comes out. And you are free to attend and to provide comments as you would at the meeting. The other item that I wanted to make mention of, as I think I let you know at the last meeting, that we are upgrading our rent registry, and that's going to be a cloud-based database now where landlords will be able to register units online. We'll certainly be still receiving paper registrations if those come in. We started our information sessions for landlords this week. So we're in the process of training landlords on how to register for the new system, and then once they are registered and ready to go, how to link their properties, and then to start the registrations when that is available. I think that we're targeting this for July 1st. If not July 1st, then shortly thereafter. Those are all my comments.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions or comments for staff? Commissioner O'Keefe.
Go ahead. Mine's not on his topic, so here's my view.
Okay. My question is, I'm still concerned about smoking in the unit, that information. So, because what staff is going to provide to City Council, it would include information on possible eviction protections for the tenants, or any possible scenarios that landlords can use to get the tenants out. I used to joke that, you know, in order for the landlord to get out, if the smoking ordinance would pass, so it would be like a 3-day notice to quit or quit. So quit smoking.
Well, and remember,
what type of protections the tenants will have?
Yeah, so right now, smoking is not a nuisance under the rent stabilization ordinance, and so it's not a valid reason for a just cause eviction. And we point that out, and we also point out that the other, our rent stabilized cities of Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, and Berkeley all also have that same recognition that smoking isn't a nuisance. And so that perhaps is one of the stronger protections in place for tenants that are smoking.
Can they use as can smoking be used as a damage to the property if it's not nuisance?
It's a civil matter. We do present the item, and we do present some of the past explorations that West Hollywood has gone through regarding smoking. This isn't a new topic for West Hollywood. So I would encourage you to, once the report comes out, read the report, and if you are compelled, please attend the meeting, and you are welcome to speak under public comment, share your thoughts with the council.
Okay. And the last question, sorry, thank you. The smoking, it's not just smoking cigarettes, it's smoking also marijuana, anything, right? When we say smoking general, is smoking anything?
Yes, it is, and we do point that out as well.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner O'Keefe.
So in the first appeal, we had the issue come up that the hearing examiner had directed someone to submit information. They submitted it, and it never was given an error message or anything, and apparently it wasn't received. And I'm wondering if you have anything, if in light of that, any IT practices are being changed, or what can be done so that this doesn't happen in the future?
We've had this happen before, unrelated to hearings, where someone has submitted a large piece of something, and it shows that it was sent, and it just never shows up. So it's something that perhaps our IT department could look into, but separate and apart from that, I've been looking at developing some language and some recommendations for folks, because certainly, you know, we're just becoming more and more online, and I think more and more people think that they can just hit the button, send, boom, instantaneously submitted, done, everything's good. So we're looking at how we can update our forms and provide some additional guidance. Maybe if we can ascertain the largest file size that we possibly can receive, and then we'll give some instruction perhaps on setting, loading it into a Box account and then sending us a link to the Box account to receive the document, something like that. But so it's in process. It's not something we have ready yet, but we're aware of it and we're looking at it.
Okay, or maybe, I don't know if there's an online form instead of an email, or it just seems unfortunate because it slows. He's been
Yeah,
paying
no, it's
rent
fair.
for
I think that
or whatever.
I think that we need to help out with guidance because we are more and more electronic today, and so we just need to be able to provide the kind of information so that people can get the documents into us and successfully submit.
Yeah, I was actually curious, and I tested on my own phone sending a big file, and with mine, it just said it might not send because it's too big, and then it went in my outbox. And that's how that one ended.
Commissioners, further questions or comment? Very well. The next regular meeting of the Rent Stabilization Commission will be held June 13th, 2019, 7 p.m. here at the West Hollywood Library in the Council Chambers. This meeting is adjourned.